So with regard to this issue of contact between Western psychology and Dharma or Buddhist psychology or Buddhism, of course this is one of the things that are most interesting for me personally, and basically I see Dhamma as a science of human psychology, and I see the Buddha as a remarkable, incredibly gifted psychologist in ancient times. But of course, for many people on both sides, either in the West or in our Buddhist world, there are many people who are so easily aggravated by this kind of contact. And I really don't see it as something that is rational, to be honest. I usually just feel that it is some sort of an emotionally charged reaction to the challenges that are sometimes brought about by this kind of contact. Also the opportunities, the things that you begin to see that you didn't know about your own understanding and your own theory about what is psychology. See, that kind of contact, and this is something that is very interesting. But the thing that makes it interesting for me is that it gives a lot of insight and allows for remarkable opportunities to expand one's scope of investigation, in both cases, Buddhist and Western. But that could be very challenging and somewhat undermines the authority of established figures because of the new findings. And basically a contact like that could prove that our previous understanding was limited, that there is much to Buddhism that we didn't know about, and that came to our awareness only by advances, say, in neuroscience, for example. That is already happening. And vice versa. You look at things like psychoanalysis, which is a very robust psychological movement in the West. And, well, you add meditation to it, and then you see how much its biggest figures, like Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung, didn't really know much about how far meditation can contribute to the practice of gaining access to the unconscious. Things of that sort. You see, that kind of contact is naturally exposes the limitations of understanding, and that upsets many people. I'm talking about that point because it seems that this is what concerns you, about that. To you, it felt like there is some negativity in that kind of contact. Of course, you have a point, because there are so many writings written by both Western psychologists and Buddhist figures which look with negativity and with disfavor about that kind of contact. And to be honest, as I said at the beginning, I don't really think that this is a very rational position. Because, what do you have to lose? You can criticize certain aspects about that context. It's, for example, certain people are recklessly, let's say, willing to reduce certain aspects about Dhamma or Dhamma in general to specific limited Western psychological terms. We see this happen a lot with positive psychology, for example. The idea of growth and self-development and that sort of thing. And sometimes also on our Buddhist side, sometimes people will try to bend Western psychology to suit certain Buddhist ideas where they are in fact not very much compatible. So people sort of like misusing the discoveries done by each tradition in order to promote their own views and their own, say, dogmas sometimes. You see, even in the field of psychology, there is a lot of place for dogma. But I don't see these examples to represent something that makes us take a general negative position in relation to that kind of contact. And on the contrary, I think that there's been a lot of writings which promote that kind of contact, and without losing sight of the possible limitations of it, and also without trying to deny the fundamental differences between Buddhist psychology and Western psychology. And this is something that I wrote about a lot. It's a very important issue for me. So let's say I'm one of those who believe that this contact is not only beneficial but necessary, and I do believe that it's contributing very positively and can contribute very positively in augmenting our understanding of our own tradition. And this is something that I wrote about in the past in my last book, Motivation and Effort, and I'm still writing about presently. I don't know, but I feel that sometimes people who take negative attitudes with regard to that kind of contact maybe have a problem with innovation in general. And this is something that we honestly suffer from in the Theravada tradition, which is perhaps to a much lesser extent in other Buddhist sects in Mahayana or Vajrayana. On the contrary, in fact, you might find Zen Buddhists and Tibetan Buddhists very keen on interacting with Western science in general. But we don't have anything of the like in the Theravada. And, there is no stated position against that kind of contact. And I feel sometimes it's just an issue of having the authority of established orthodox interpretations being challenged by this kind of contact. And you find this very clearly in the attitudes of people who oppose that kind of contact. They also oppose with equal and even more antagonism any alternative interpretations from within their own Buddhist traditions by other Buddhist figures. You see, it is an opposition to difference of opinion in general. It's in opposition to innovation, to progress in understanding, and to debate. And this is something that we really suffer from deeply in our Theravada tradition, to the extent that we hardly ever have any historically established tradition of debate within ourselves. It just doesn't exist. It is a rarity, by the way. In most other religious traditions and sects, you find a certain extent of a tradition of debate, of negotiation, compromise between different sects and opinions and things of that sort. In the Theravada tradition, there is nothing of the like. It's just ideas that have been established by interpreters, basically. I mean, Venerable Buddha Gosa was an interpreter par excellence. And ever since then, every father commentary and every father commentarial figure basically agrees with what was before that and adds something that is of a pedantic nature to it. And it just keeps going on and on and on until the present. As we don't have a culture and we don't have a tradition of the practice of debate and difference of opinion, And this appears very clearly in the kind of reactions that people who do promote or advanced alternative interpretations meet by their fellow practitioners in the Theravada tradition. It's really something sad to see, and it's very visible throughout modern, contemporary times in the Theravada tradition. So I think it's an attitude of conservatism in the handling of established ideas, and I think it's really prominent. It's very visible and very prominent, and strangely, there is nothing at all in the Vinaya, the monastic code of the Theravada Buddhism, which prohibits or even look with disfavor at this kind of debate and dialogue. On the contrary, actually, it is something that is completely allowed and sometimes encouraged. And if I'm not mistaken, sometimes it's the duty of a monk to engage with another when they see that they have certain problems of understanding of Dhamma. So there's absolutely no basis for this kind of conservative, dogmatic, orthodox attitude in handling innovation or new ideas. And I have no idea really how did it historically begin. There are a lot of things in the Theravada tradition that have become so deeply established that may have emerged at a certain point in history that is unknown origin to us. But here's the thing that really makes me wonder about this is, what is it that you have to lose? What are you afraid of by expanding the scope of your curiosity, basically, which is something that corresponds very much to the ancient spirit, to the ancient zeitgeist, when sources of information and knowledge were so scarce that people interested themselves in about every theory and every phenomenon and every discovery. Presently, perhaps because of this abundance of sources of information and the emergence of the specialization, the idea that you in your lifetime you have enough time and enough effort only for specific field of knowledge. Yet people now hold on so hard to what they already know and to their field of expertise, and there's a lot of resistance to expanding the scope of curiosity and interest, even in alternative or different traditions within the same field. And this is very strange for me, really. I mean, I don't understand it at all, because you don't have anything to lose. Perhaps the opposite. You have everything to win, everything to a lot of possibility, opportunity to learn something or to expand your knowledge. So, and I found that to be already the case, particularly with evolutionary psychology, which I employed very vigorously in the analysis and investigation of the concept of motivation and effort in Buddhist psychology. So this is for me a very clear example of how something that is unknown to Buddhism, which is evolutionary psychology and evolutionary science, can contribute so well and in a very useful way to our own understanding of something that is very important, which is motivation in Buddhist psychology. And of course, you see, when you learn about evolutionary science, you begin to see a lot of meaning in the Pali text that you couldn't possibly discern before that. That's what I mean by the contribution that other traditions of psychology could contribute to our own understanding of our own Dharma, let's say. You read the suttas that you've read before and you say, oh, so that's what this word means. So that's what this sutta is referring to. Things that you couldn't possibly imagine before if you would rely solely on linguistic mastery of the Pali language or a translation of it. So I think it's essential, I think it's very important to embark on this kind of cooperation and to drop all these negative attitudes about their potential problems. I'm not denying that sometimes it leads to problems, but if you practice meditation incorrectly, it might lead to problems. It doesn't mean that there's something to dislike about the practice of meditation itself. It's just that some people will do things in a wrong way, in an incorrect or in their own way, and they will come to their own conclusions. And you see that doesn't say anything bad about the practice of cooperation and about the possibilities of and opportunities of that could come out of this kind of cooperation. And it's something that I'm continuously preoccupied with. Presently, for example, with neuroscience, it is something that is a vast field of knowledge that I'm learning about, and it's really quite amazing in the potential which it really offers to enhance our understanding of certain a lot of Buddhist ideas that are otherwise not very clear. And this is another thing that we have a problem with. You see, we many people operate on the basis of the assumption that we have already secured the Dhamma, that we already understand everything there is to understand about it, that there are no gaps and there are no missing series of information. There are no dots that are not connected. You see, that's a general a presumption, let's say, and of course, if you believe that this is the case, then you're not motivated. You don't see the point of trying to expand your understanding or engagement with other traditions of psychology or of science about the human psyche. But of course, to me, the reality is rather maybe the opposite. I've always believed that there is so much that we still don't understand about the Buddha Dhamma, and that there is so much room for further discovery and also revision of a lot of the concepts and practices that we're already following. And another problem that I'm very concerned with, and I also feel that the contact with contemporary Western psychology contributes to a lot, is a problem of language. The language that we use in order to convey most of the Buddhist ideas, concepts and practices, they are, I believe, too much devoted to the original Pali. And that's wonderful if the listener knows Pali or has a sense of the idiomatic or metaphoric nature of the languages, which Pali language is very highly idiomatic, by the way. And this is something that would be debatable in itself, but you see this very clearly in interpretation and translations of the Pali text. Everybody's complaining about English translations, in spite of the fact that they've contributed a lot to our understanding of many Dhamma concepts, and these are very valuable resource. But of course, there's not a single practitioner who doesn't struggle with the text as it is translated. And then if you were to make an effort to learn Pali and start to read the original, then you find that the ambiguity only increases rather than decreases. You say this, it is amazing how I thought the problem was in the English translation, but it turns out that the original is even more ambiguous. and then you see how much interpretation the translator is doing, mostly following medieval commentarial references. And then you say, well, this is a whole field of something that requires revision, or something that requires to be scrutinized more. And aside from all this, we're just judging by how we use language presently to convey ideas. I think it's highly problematic. And you see this very clearly when someone says, well, you cannot reduce the Dhamma to Western psychology or to any specific tradition outside of the Dhamma, because the Dhamma is greater than all these Western traditions or other traditions and so on. And you see, I too believe this. I actually believe that Buddhist psychology may possibly even be superior. I would use that word quite confidently. Superior to the different traditions in Western psychology. You see, but that's a bold statement. You see, and when someone I don't have any aversion or any, it's not condescending, not looking down upon Western psychology. On the contrary, as I said already, it has contributed a lot to our own understanding of our own Dhamma. But the problem is that when people have negative attitudes about this kind of cooperation and contact, and then they say, well, the Dhamma is so greater than this, and you ask them, well, how is it greater? How exactly is the Dhamma great? What is it that is in Dhamma which is not in Western psychology? And that's the kind of thing that interests me a lot, because I want to listen to you. I want to learn from you. What is it that you see in the psychological teachings of the Buddha that are not present in Western psychology? Because this is actually very interesting for Western psychology too. And there are a number of things of that sort. You see, that's my idea of cooperation. Then when you ask them about these things, they start telling you things like, well, we have nirvana, it's enlightenment, it's liberation. What's the meaning of these things? We are using a language here that doesn't communicate. When you speak about transcendental dimensions in the Dhamma, and you say that they transcend, they go beyond Western psychology, you need to be able to express yourself in such a way that will actually convey meaning, convey a vibrant meaning, and are clear, that are not ambiguous, and that communicate. Because when you use poetic expressions such as nirvana and things of that sort, you just lose the audience immediately, or you win them by faith rather than by understanding. So I think that we do have the same applies also to cosmological dimensions, which are in fact very important. I do believe that the cosmological dimension in the Dhamma is very important and exercises significant influence on the practice experience. But you see, try to communicate about this in any meaningful way. You need language, you need a repertoire of vocabulary that will succeed in clarifying what you understand from the perspective of others. And that's not easy, by the way. If you rely on Pali vocabulary, then you will not be able to communicate very well. So one of the things that really I discovered, basically, that knowledge in Western psychology, and sometimes also other religions, will that kind of contact provide you with the kind of vocabulary and the kind of language. It updates your language in such a way that makes you able to communicate your own understanding of Dhamma in a better way. And this is a major problem. This linguistic dimension, I believe, is a very serious problem, because we have a problem of understanding, as I explained earlier. We have a lot of limitations in understanding, but we also have great limitations in language. The language that we are using is highly problematic, and there is need for updating it. Sometimes limitations in understanding preclude the possibility of updating the language that we use, because, well, we disagree amongst ourselves as Buddhists. We disagree about fundamental concepts and principles. You know, expressions such as nibbida, nirodha, you know, dukkha. We don't have any agreement about what is it exactly that these things mean. We don't even have any agreement about whether they have any exact meaning in the first place. And this is my own position, for example, that we presume that there is a certain specific meaning to these keywords, while in fact there may be none. It may possibly be covering an entire spectrum of meaning that's actually quite vast in the case of Pali literature. And this is another dimension when we are talking about the Pali text. What is it that we're dealing with here? Is it the speech of the Buddha, or is it a documentation of the speech of the Buddha? By means of by what means was it preserved? What kind of writing? What kind of copying? This is a whole other dimension of investigation. I was already asked a question about it, and I will try to answer it soon. So you see, despite of the fact that all Buddhist sects agree that there is something quite remarkable and unique about Buddhist psychology and about Dhamma, we have a very big difficulty in expressing what that thing is. This is, I believe, a very big problem, and I believe that it can be solved, at least in part, by means of cooperation and contact with other traditions, not just Western psychology, but also other religions, ancient mythology, even folklore, things of that sort. You know, these things illuminate a lot of the or help enable us decipher a lot of the things that are otherwise preserved in very ambiguous and obscure language, you know, in the case of our Pali literature.